Alright, with this video, what I want to do is talk a little bit about the types of photography and some of the aspects of related design. And I'm also going to get into different aspects of the camera that will allow you to take different types of pictures. This is going to probably be a pretty long video because I really love photography, and I've been doing it since I was about 17 years old, which puts me about 40 years of teaching photography. Hopefully some of the things that we're going to talk about during this video you can use in taking your own pictures and putting them together for your photography design. Now, the first type of picture I want to talk about, and I actually just did these in alphabetical order, they're very much jumping around, there's no organization other than alphabetical order, would be action. Now, all of the pictures in this video have been taken off the internet. You're free to go out on the internet and find similar pictures. I also kept them at a thumbnail resolution so that I'm not taking up a lot of space or a lot of data or memory. So they're a little bit blurry, a little bit fuzzy. If you go into the internet and you look at a picture, the first thing you'll see is a thumbnail. And they are very small pictures, small files, so that they can come up on the screen quickly. But if you're going to enlarge them, you really need to click and say, let me see the picture at full size, and then use that picture in order to use it in a project or activity. As you should have discovered earlier on in the unit that we're talking about, there are such things as liability, and to use pictures off the internet for your own use for profit is illegal. That's copyright infringement. But again, thanks to the Freedom of Use Act, or the Fair Use Act, students and educators are allowed to use these videos to explain the concepts. This particular picture here obviously took place in a studio. They have a dark background. They've controlled very carefully the light involved, and to get an effect like this, most likely the photographer used a strobe light and left the camera open. Every camera has a shutter release and a shutter speed, so the more expensive cameras can be controlled to where they could be left open for minutes, hours, any number of time. Some of the cheaper cameras have very limited exposure time. So depending on what you're wanting to do, that would affect what type of camera you'd like to buy. And like I said, most of these are probably done professionally by somebody that has some pretty good equipment. You don't need that equipment to learn to take good pictures. And even using a camera phone, as long as it's got a fairly good resolution, will work pretty good. But what I imagine what happened with this is the camera set up on the tripod. The camera then is opened, exposed. The shutter is exposed for possibly several minutes. And then a strobe light is flashing, and that's what illuminates the lady as she's dancing across the screen. Every time the strobe light flashes, that image is recorded. When the strobe light is off, there's that little delay where you can see the differentiation between the people. Interesting technique to try if you have the ability. Now, here we have another motion picture, and it looks from the angle of this. If you notice, the people involved in here are fairly clear, even though when you're taking something like this, it's a little hard to have them perfectly clear. But they're fairly clear, and it looks like the person with the camera was actually on the ride and probably, again, went for a longer shutter speed, possibly 1/250th or something like that. 1/125th is about the speed of you blinking your eyelid. And that's a pretty good starting point to determine if you want motion in your picture or not. We always talk about having a good sharp picture. Sometimes that's desirable. Sometimes you want a little bit of motion to give that feeling of speed. So I imagine in this picture the cameraman actually was on the ride, left it open for 1/250th or a little bit more, and then took the picture as they were moving. And since they were moving in unison, the people are fairly clear while the background becomes blurry. And this is a good technique to play around with a little bit. Again, another picture, fairly long shutter speed. You've got a lot of motion there, and by keeping that open, that gets that motion of the hair and the water coming out of there. This is probably not a really tremendously long exposure, but if you notice the background is very sharp, the front image is then a little blurry from the speed. A lot of times if you're going to take pictures like this, you really want to use a tripod or possibly set your camera on a table or something that's going to be very stable in order to keep from blurring the entire picture, which is undesirable. Good action picture. This looks like it was taken pretty much with a standard picture. You got a little bit of blur where the dolphin fins are coming out of the water, but again, probably handheld, 125th speed, somewhere around that range. And if you don't know a lot about camera speed, that is how long the camera is exposing the object, that is something you might want to look up on the internet and research, because it is a lot of fun to get some special effects. It's a little bit more advanced technique, and if you're starting out, I don't want to delve into that, but if you take the class, an advanced class in photography, that's something you definitely want to learn how to control and master. The last picture is very much like the one above it. Whoever took this picture was probably on the ride. They focused on the teddy bear. They tried to keep the camera fairly still, and then the background is moving, and there's all kinds of different techniques with this. Sometimes if the object is moving separately, you'll actually follow the object with your camera, which will keep the object fairly much in focus, and then the background would be blurred like this. So these are some examples of action photography, and if possible, I'd like you to maybe try to take some like this for your final photography project for this class. Black and white photography is, well, black and white. In the old days, when we developed film in the darkroom, you actually had black and white film, black and white chemicals. The chemicals at the time in black and white were, it's been a while, 3 to 4 different chemicals if you count the rinse, goes in step by step. When you got into a darkroom and you did color photography, there was like 8 to 12 different steps. You had to develop each color individually. Took a lot more time. In addition, black and white film, your temperature of your chemicals could be off maybe up to 5 degrees, whereas color photography required your chemicals to be within a degree or two of a specific temperature. And if they were outside of that range, the colors did not appear normal. Today, we don't really do all that stuff. It's done in the camera. And you have 2 options here. You can set your camera up to shoot the picture in black and white, or you can shoot the picture in color and then Photoshop it and turn it into black and white later. Most people that I know, that I talk to, or that are professionals, they like to take it in color and then convert it to black and white later, because it just gives them a little bit more flexibility to play around, and they think that the quality of the contrast, the black and the white together, is a little bit better. Now, as we go through these pictures, I also want to kind of point out some of the things. We have repeating lines, and that's something we talked about a long time ago when we talked about design. We have these leading lines here on the side leading to us to the distance. One of the things you can do with a picture like this is simply put in a point of interest. You could have a person, especially a young child or 2 young children, walking along the tracks going into the distance. Possibly, again, photoshopping a bright colored leaf or something off to the side. Something that provides a point of interest for the viewer to see. While this is not a bad picture, it could have a little bit more added to it. Another black and white picture, and again we have a lot of contrast here. We have the dark against a fairly white, light gray background. We have a little bit of framing down here at the bottom. And again, these are all techniques that we talked about in the design unit, and that I want to kind of review and go over as we're discussing photography, because they're very, very important in photography. Simple and effective and interesting. Some people, Ansel Adams is probably historically one of the best at, sorry I lost my mic there, hopefully I didn't lose too much, but Ansel Adams is one of the big historical black and white photographers that become greatly famous, and that's a name you might want to look up, research on the internet if you're really interested in photography. Ansel Adams did a lot of black and white photography because that was pretty much the standard, but also he liked the control that he could have over it, and he did a lot of photography pictures out west around Yellowstone and things like that. Some people specialize in black and white photography because they're interested in it. Another, if you notice, possibly putting a black card behind your picture, and we have lighting that appears to be coming from the right here, and again we have a lot of contrast, light against dark, and that's very, very important in black and white. And again, that was one of the big things that we talked about in the design unit way back at the beginning of the course. Another, we have the repeating lines. We talked about that before. A lot of contrast here. And these could be black and white balls or whatever they are, or they actually could be another color that is then converted to black and white to get that effect. I also love the reflection of different things that you can often get in something like this. Again, here we go, black and white. We have a lot of white here, a lot of contrast. We have a lot of dark here. Probably this was done with a separate lighting source over here. And if you can't afford to buy a separate light or to have the money to do that, simply try a dark room, having a window off to the side over here, and having this person sitting in front of that. We also broke this up. Instead of putting, if you notice the picture up here with the flower, it broke kind of the rule, the law of thirds. It's very well centered. It's what we call asymmetrical or balanced. If you divided it right down the middle, the left and the right halves are pretty much the same. Here we went back to the law of thirds, and we placed that person off to the side in about 1/3 of that area. And again, another very effective technique applied to photography. Again, a lot of repeating lines here. We have, this is what's called depth of field, and this is controlled by your f-stop. And again, that's a little bit more advanced technique, but one way to do that is simply to set your camera, focus here, and be far away from your subject, but use a little telephoto. That's going to put this out of focus, and that's another thing I would talk about in a more advanced class. Framing is one of the greatest things I think you can do. If you, law of thirds is probably number one, but if you learned another technique in photography, I think framing is probably one of the biggest ones, and it's really one of the easiest ones that you can accomplish. So when I look at a picture like this, the city in the background here, this would be what I would consider my subject, and this tree right here would be framing my subject. It can be on one side, it can be on the other side, it can be on all four sides, although that's very rarely done. But it just kind of frames your image or your subject. We have a little bit right here showing in the sky, and we might want to crop that out a little bit and get rid of it so this frame actually goes right up to the edge. I look at that, it's just a little bit of a distraction, but it's not real bad. These two people right here sitting on the bench also give us a couple of other options. We would call these a point of interest. So the city right here would be our subject. Here's a little point of interest just to add a little more interest to the picture. And you notice they're not looking at the camera, they're looking at our subject in the background. Here's a little bit of a different framing technique. Frame the entire thing. You have in the distance here, and it's a little bit out of focus, but you have in the distance this building, and they frame the entire picture. Don't know if I quite like that as well. Here we have a couple of things. We have a lot of contrast in the lady going right down the middle. We also broke the law of thirds. Very balanced. If you go right down the middle, the left and the right, very, very symmetrical, very even, very balanced. And then right here, the shrubs on both the left and the right do a couple of things. They frame the picture right here, and they also create these leading lines that bring our attention to the middle where our subject is. So again, a lot of photography techniques used in this one picture. Another framing, if you notice right here, framed all along the bottom, up to the right a little bit. Actually got a little bit of silhouette like this also. Now when taking a picture like this, and sunsets are a great opportunity to take pictures. We have some beautiful sunsets. The problem is they don't always turn out as you want them to. Most cameras will record the setting and automatically set it for you. Now again, you can get into advanced techniques where you control the settings and everything, but to start off with, in the very middle of your camera is probably a setting, and it's going to want to read the light right here, and it's going to want to set the camera up to take that picture with the middle being in focus. Again, I hate to say this, we don't want to do this all the time, but you should, and that's read your photography or your camera manual. But what I would do to get a picture like this, I would take my camera, I would press the shutter release button, or the button that takes the picture. I would press it halfway down against the sky, and that's going to get a reading right there. Then I'm going to readjust it with still keeping my finger halfway down on the shutter, and I'm going to readjust it to compose my picture and get all this. If I did it the other way, what would happen is, let's say if I focused right here, pressed the shutter halfway down, this would all be washed out, and this would all be in focus, and I could actually see the shrubbery and the branches and everything else. Wouldn't be near as effective picture. So one of the things you need to learn to do is to control the camera and use it to its full capacity. And again, it doesn't have to be a real expensive camera. It could be a very simple camera. Here we have another bit of framing. We focus. Now, and this time we happen to be right in the middle. We focus on this little girl right here. This is out of focus, and this is out of focus, but these are our framing right here for the little girl right in the middle. We talked about lines, and we talked about two different kinds of lines: repeating lines and leading lines. This picture right here reminds me of a scene in Forrest Gump as he's running along the road. And as a matter of fact, if I were to try to make this picture better, I'd look at a couple of options. One would be the time of day. More clouds, more a setting sun, a darker color sky. You're going to get more intense colors either in the morning hours before probably 10, 11 o'clock, depending on the weather and where you're at, or in the evening hours, probably after 5 or 6 o'clock. In the middle of the day, when you take pictures, they tend to get a little bit washed out. But what I would look at is hopefully finding a day, we can't always get this, finding a day with a lot of clouds right here to add interest, or maybe having somebody running alongside of the road or something happening out here. But that's a good example of leading lines, leading us into the distance. Here looks like a subway station, and again, if you notice up here, a lot of repeating lines, a lot of leading lines, and they take us to this vanishing point in the middle. Again, law of thirds has not been applied here. This has been very much right down the middle. Left and right are very uniform. And as we talked about before, the law of thirds is a wonderful rule to follow, but it's also a great rule as you get good to break and try some different things. And this would be a good example of that. Very symmetrical, very balanced. Here we have just a fence or a bench or something with a lot of repeating lines. And it is also black and white. Interesting picture. I'd like to see a little bit more something with it. Maybe a little child sitting along down here or something. Again, placing a leaf on there. Something just to add a little bit of uniqueness to it. Another thing you might notice is where I placed this on my slide. I placed this in the lower right hand corner because these lines lead you back into the center of my presentation. If you look up here, this leads you back in down toward the center of some of my other pictures. Here's a leaf of a cactus plant, I believe, and again, here's our law of thirds, placing it off to the side, not in the middle, and we have a lot of leading lines here, or repeating. They do both. And here, this would be a little bit different technique, but this is one where you would want the shutter speed to be a little bit longer, and that actually will give you the motion of all of the water. Most cameras, when you take a picture of water like this, the water actually freezes. You can actually see the individual drops of water. It's like it's frozen in time. By setting this on a rock or a tripod and leaving your camera still and then leaving it open for maybe a half of a second or something a little bit longer, and this is something you just have to kind of experiment and play around with a little bit. This is something that you might learn to do and get a better effect when you're looking at taking pictures. And again, we have kind of the repeating lines going vertical here that aren't really leading us anywhere. They're just kind of creating a little bit of interest. And because of this long exposure, I noticed a little bit of lines coming down through like this also. Some people actually like to specialize in nature photography. And really, there are so many different types of photography you can do. Most people usually try to find one that catches their eye, and they really try to focus on that. No pun intended with the focus comment. Now, looking at this, you're probably going to need a telephoto lens. You're probably going to need a tripod or some way to hold this steady, because you're taking the picture from so far away that it's very easy to blur, and you want to make sure this is very, very clear. Again, because it is a telephoto lens, and they use an f-stop, which is the size of the opening of the hole in your lens. They use an f-stop that is fairly small. What you'll get is this is very sharp. The background is very, very faded out. If the background were sharp also, it tends to be a distraction. And this is called, again, depth of field. Another one, getting fairly close, and if you remember, we talked about getting close to your subject, a little bit off to the right, and the butterfly is facing a little bit more to the left. If you notice, there is not as much room right here. There's a little bit more room right here in front of the object. And that's what we try to do with anything that is moving or facing in a particular direction. And that could be animals or insects or people or vehicles or any number of things. Would be another example of nature photography. They kind of centered this a little bit more. What I like here is the contrast, the kind of dark against the light background. And this feels, when I look at this picture, it feels very much like it's out in the woods. It's very natural. It wasn't posed. It was something that the photographer did just by sitting and observing. And again, if the animals or the deer aren't looking at you, and if you want that to happen, try making a little noise or breaking a branch or doing something that will gather their attention without frightening them away. This is a little bit more of a close-up, and a lot of the cameras can do it. Some of the cameras you might need special attachments. But here again, a couple of things that I notice when I see this picture is, one, it's very likely that the photographer had a piece of black construction paper and put behind the object before he took the picture, and that just gets rid of all of the distractions in the background. You've got a little bit of this in the foreground that's kind of faded out, and that's a little bit of framing. And then another really nice technique is to learn to get in the habit of taking a spritz bottle of water with you and spraying that down on the plant or flower before you take the picture. And these little drops of water, just first of all, they're going to bring out the intensity of the color of the object, but secondly, they're going to give us little points of interest and little areas that catch our attention and reflect a little bit more light. Now, something like this would be very, very tough to catch. This is probably a case, and one of the things that's really great with photography today is I can take 1,000 pictures and I don't have to develop them. All I have to do is find one or two that I really, really like, and those are the ones that I'm going to keep, and I'm going to delete all of the rest of them. Again, in the old days when you had to go into the dark room and you had to develop every picture, something like this would be very rare to catch. You'd have to catch it right at the moment. You'd have to be lucky enough that it's one of the few pictures that you were going to take, because we're not going to develop 1,000 pictures. It would take far too much time. But again, one of the great things about digital photography is you can just sit there and snap shot after shot after shot, delete all the ones that you don't like, keep the ones that you do. Now, there's a great business for this, and again, a lot of professional people will do this. It takes a lot of talent. If you're going to pay a model like this $5,000 or $10,000 to show up for 3 hours of work, you want to make sure that you have the lighting right, you have everything you need there. You're probably going to have makeup people, you're going to have a lot of expenses incurred, but hopefully you're probably doing it for a business, and you're also going to make a lot of money. Very, very centered. We have a little bit of action with the hair moving, and that could be because she moved, or it could be a fan blowing. All kinds of different techniques to get effects like this. But I would say this is most likely a professional shot, as is this one, but we've got a couple of things. Again, getting a little bit far away, using a little more of a telephoto lens, that causes us to get our subject in focus, and the background's out of focus, and it's not really a distraction. Also, the bricks in the wall right here are creating leading lines, leading our attention right to our subject right here. Kids and babies of any kind, animals or human, are great subjects to take pictures of. It really invokes emotion with the viewer, and that's something you really like to do. Again, if we were to look at this, the baby's a little bit off to the right. We have a little bit smaller area here. We have a little bit bigger area right here where the baby's looking, and we have the background kind of faded out. We also have a little bit of repeating lines in this design here of the blanket or whatever it is that they have the baby sitting on. Family pictures often are portraits, and they can be formal, or sometimes a lot of professional photographers, after they get the formal pictures done, will set up things like this and try to get some informal pictures. And many times those informal pictures will take better results than the formal ones. Pets are also good objects that you can, or subjects rather, that you can take portrait pictures of. And again, the smaller and the cuter, the more people like them. And again, here we have a portrait of the young lady. We have a little bit of framing with her hands right here. I wouldn't be surprised if this is not a wedding picture with the ring right there. And then we're using the back of the head here to kind of frame her face right here. So once again, the gorgeous bride gets all of the attention, and the handsome groom gets relegated to a back picture. Scape photography is another one that sometimes people really like to get into. A lot of times these are vacation pictures. Now, a long time ago in the composition video that we showed, we talked about the law of thirds. And the law of thirds, we're dividing a picture up into thirds like a tic-tac-toe board. But also, the lines that go horizontal should be either a third from the top, which is what we have right here, or a third from the bottom. What I tell my students when they're doing something like this is what's more important. If the bottom is more important, and in this case I believe it is, then we want less sky. If the sky were more important, then we want less down here. Another thing is we've framed the side of the picture here a little bit. Also, white attracts attention. So we have this waterfall right here that really attracts our attention right away. Then our eyes can kind of wander around and look at the rest of the scene and get it all together. So a scape picture is really taking a picture of it, something from a distance. So this would be a landscape picture, and I would say the waterfall would be my point of interest. It's something there, it's not my real focus, but it's something there to add interest to the viewer and to attract their attention. I love these type of pictures. As a matter of fact, one of the links that I put in the Angel lesson is a website that has a lot of reflective pictures, and I just love the way this is done. Now, you're going to look at this and you can say, wait a minute, Mr. Hughes, you said the horizon line should be right a third from the top or a third from the bottom. And by the way, just to refresh your memory, the horizon line is either a visual or an imaginary line where the sky meets the land. And sometimes you can actually see it, sometimes it might not be there, but your mind and your eye can imagine it from all the experiences that you've had throughout your life. This time we broke the rule. We put that horizon line almost smack dab in the middle. But look at the reflection here, the repeating lines, the reflection of all the trees down below. Not only that, the colors, the time of year. I have seen pictures like this where a storm is passed and everything's wet, and it really intensifies the colors. The sky of the passing storm is dark. The sun shining on the front of these trees really make those stand out. So if you're going to really go into photography and you really want an interest in it, some of the things you're going to have to look at is the weather. And actually you're going to get more intensity, better color, and more interesting pictures if it's a cloudy or a rainy day. Another one where we kind of broke the rules right here. The horizon line's kind of right in the middle, but we've taken a picture just half and half right here, broke the rules. This would be considered a seascape because it's a picture of the sea. Something that might make this a little bit more interesting would be to wait patiently, have a ship out here, or something that just gives us a little point of interest, a little idea or subject out there to take a picture of or include in our picture. Up in Chicago, they call this the bean, but again, our horizon line about 1/3 from the bottom, and then we have a subject right in the middle. So we kind of broke the rules there a little bit on the subject, but we kept the rules on the horizon line. Black and white picture, just because it's very effective. And another cityscape, horizon line about 1/3 from the bottom, everything else is up at the top. And again, to wait for that right day for good clouds like here, a little more interesting clouds like up here, sometimes that requires a lot of patience on the part of the photographer. And let's be honest, sometimes it's just being lucky and being in the right place at the right time. Another one that I really like is silhouettes, and silhouettes kind of relate to contrast. And contrast, if you remember again from composition earlier on, is light against dark or dark against light. And again, we have to control the camera. What we would want to do in this case is we don't want that camera to read the hands, because the hands then would be the part that's in focus, and then the background would probably be overly exposed and just kind of whitish. So we might take our camera, center it up around here, press that shutter halfway down, readjust and compose our picture, and then take the shot. If you accidentally take your hand off the shutter button and it resets, just do it again. Take 5-10 pictures of this, like we said before. It doesn't cost you anything. The ones that don't turn out, you delete them, you get rid of them. So experiment a lot with learning where is the focus or the reader on your camera that senses the amount of light, and set your camera up for that. Again, beautiful sunset. Probably took a reading up here, readjusted it. We have the silhouettes of these cacti sticking up. We have the horizon line, law of thirds, and we've really got that silhouette look here. This one I would imagine was probably done in a studio, or taking a sheet or white piece of paper and putting in the background, and then focusing on this. Another technique would be, and this is not as common unless you're a professional, would be to put this plant on the other side of a sheet, put the light on the other side of the sheet, and then just get the shadow of this on the sheet in the foreground. Another great picture, if you notice, it's a little bit low, but it's still very effective. Law of thirds, horizon lines down here. We have a little bit of framing, and we have these kind of repeating and leading lines bringing us out to the center of the picture. Beautiful colors, giving us a great look. And then our last one here, very low contrast here. It's very hard to see what any of the detail is down here. And then up here we get the lights of the city. And this again, very good silhouette picture. And again, this is one of the requirements that you have for your photography unit. I asked you early on to just take some pictures and put them on the Angel website, and I'm going to give you credit for those. But then what I want to see is a lot of difference between those pictures and these. I want to see some of the things that we're talking about here being applied in the new pictures that you take. And while I can't control it, and while I can't know for sure that you took these pictures, I'm just going to have to trust you on this. And again, if you have a real interest in photography, as I have through my lifetime, these are techniques that you want to learn if you're going to go into this area. One of the things you really want to try to do, and one of the things that makes an average picture an outstanding picture, is when it tells a story. And I tell my students in my classroom, if you could sit down and write a story about a picture that you see, that's going to be a good picture. So you want to look at how to tell a story, some of the things that you can do, something that is going to elicit the emotions of the person looking at this. Now, when I look at this one, I would love to see on here just a little drop of paint, maybe on the forehead and the nose, just to get a little bit of difference in that story right there. But one of the things we talk about, get close to your subject, fill the frame. Now, that wouldn't apply if you're doing landscapes, but get close to your subject and really fill the frame. And then we also have these hands here that kind of give us that framing technique that we talked about before. Again, not a whole lot on here. It might be neat that if we saw somebody stepping in the water or whatever, but we know what's going on. We can see a story. We could write about this. Maybe putting a little point of interest in here. A ball that's been blown by the wind, an umbrella that's upside down that's been caught. And these can be something that you actually see, or it's something that you can compose. You could set this up, you see the scene, you use your imagination, and you add the things that you want. And I would just love to put something right here to give you the picture that you want. As I talked about before, young people, young animals, kittens, things like that, really invoke a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling. And the same thing is for really old people that have a lot of facial features, where we can see the experience of age on their faces. We can see the lines. Again, our background is very dark. It does not distract. We filled the frame with the face. We have our lighting over here. It's very low. You notice it's not too bright. We're not getting washout. We're able to see the wrinkles and the age spots and everything in the face of this older gentleman. And I call him an older gentleman because I am one of those too, but not quite that old. Here we've broken that rule, law of thirds. It's centered right in the middle. We've also got the horizon line back here that's right in the middle. But we have a second kind of an imaginary horizon line right here that is right where we need to be. This was photoshopped, where they take this and they add that little dash of color. And obviously you could write a story about this young romance going on between this young couple. Again, babies really cut it no matter what. And when you can get a funny expression on a baby, that's when you send it into America's Funny Videos and make a little bit more money. And a great story right here also. So when you're taking pictures, look at things that are going around in the world around you. A young kid getting a popsicle in the summertime. Any number of things. An old couple walking and still holding hands, or a young couple in an embrace showing their emotions and their caring. Try to tell a story when you're taking your pictures. Not that you have to tell the story, but the viewer should be able to write about that story. Another thing that a lot of people like to do is take texture. And texture can be in a lot of different places. And a lot of times the exposure, the time of day, and again I mentioned before, early morning, late at night, can really make a dramatic effect. Sometimes you can take almost the same picture 3 or 4 different times at a different setting. And again, as you get to be a better photographer, you learn to change your settings. This is called bracketing, where the camera tells you that they want to take the picture at a particular f-stop, and then you go to an f-stop above that and an f-stop below that, and you get a variety of color and intensity of light. And a lot of professionals will do this. Some of the more expensive cameras, if you're going to get into that, actually have settings where they will do all 3 at the same time. So experimenting is just the only thing you can do about it. Just try it over and over again. Here we have texture. It's a brick wall. I don't find anything really exciting about it, but one of the things you can do, and I'm going to show you here in the next couple of shots, is find something, a little bit of ivy growing up the wall, or a little bit of something there, maybe a window or the corner of a window. Maybe the paint is starting to peel like this one. And just have that little point of interest in your texture. Here we have almost an identical picture, but look at the difference, not only in the color intensity and the time of day it was taken, but of the design in the bricks that was actually created. And again, they broke the law of thirds and they put it right in the middle. But this would have been a very effective picture, putting it over to the side a little bit or putting it right in the middle. So that's up to you, the photographer, to choose. And here we have this white strip of a feather, and again, a lot of repeating lines and a lot of texture. And I would look at these as more of an artistic type of picture, but some people love to do this, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And this is, again, something that you might experiment with, and you have to get to the point where you learn to look at things in different ways. A lot of times in life, we're in a hurry, we're in a rush, we walk right by, and we don't stop and really look closely at things. And that's something you need to learn to do if you're going to become a designer or a photographer. Time exposures is another technique that I really like, and it really takes a lot of practice. And you have to have a camera that you can control the shutter speed and leave it open for possibly a very long period of time. And again, anywhere from maybe a half of a second, anywhere up to maybe hours. They have pictures called star shots, where they'll set a camera up looking up into the sky. They'll open the shutters of the camera and lock it down, and then walk away and leave it open for perhaps all night long, and then come back and shut it. And what you'll actually get is the turning of the Earth and the orbiting of the Earth will actually create star trails up in the sky of these stars. And it's a cool effect, but again, your camera has to be a little bit capable of doing things that a normal camera would not be able to do. Now this particular picture right here is done using flashlights, and we have it could be a couple of people, and I would say that's probably what they used here. What they did was, while these two people are standing there, they put the camera on a tripod, they leave the shutter open, and then somebody would walk around with a flashlight and just kind of create the outline of each person, giving a little bit of extra attention right here, following that outline, shutting the camera off, walking around and putting the little heart in the middle, and then that person walks around and turns the camera off while these two people are just standing there. So this could take a considerable amount of time. I've played with it with my daughter, and we've gone anywhere from 20 seconds up to a couple of minutes, and it's a fun activity if you can get into a very dark location. You don't want to be in around the city or a lot of city lights or house lights or anything like that. But it really is a lot of fun. You can put filters over the camera, or I'm sorry, over the flashlight, wax paper to get a little bit different colors. Sometimes you might come in and flash the light in the face to get a little bit of the image of the face. There's just all kinds of things that you can do with this to play around. And again, you might take a whole evening and you might take 50 pictures, and you might only have one that you really, really like. Same thing right here. They have a kind of a landscape. They then took some type of lighting and they just drew and played around with it and created different designs on here, giving the image of what's going on. It could have been a stick. Looks like there might have been a fire there. They picked up a stick that was on fire and used that to move around. Now, because the light is so low, you're saying, all right, if there's somebody walking around there with a flashlight over here or a burning ember over here, why can't we see that person? And the answer is because the amount of light is so low and that person is constantly moving, they won't show up. And that's one of the cool things about a time exposure. It's only going to get the bright areas or the bright lights, or it's only going to get something that stops for a while. So if we're doing something like this and somebody's creating this, they could actually move over here, stop for 30 seconds, then move again, stop for 30 seconds, and you would get this ghostly image on the screen showing you some different things. Here's another type of time exposure. Again, you would need a camera that you could leave the exposure open for 30 seconds, possibly more. And again, the thing about this is you just have to play around with it, and you have to try 15 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute. See which one looks the best. But we set the camera up on a tripod, or we set it up on something stationary, and then we just let the machine do all the work. And then when the camera shuts off, we look at what appeared. What did we get with it? And it's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing this. It takes a while. It takes some practice. But eventually, you're going to get some really cool pictures. And again, anything that moves, anything that has light, is subject to a time exposure. You could even possibly take a picture of the moon as it's going across the sky and get a trail of the moon. Here, setting up on an overpass or a hillside, getting the lights of the city and the lights of the cars. And it's kind of easy to tell. The white lights are cars that are coming towards you. The red and the yellowish lights are cars that are going away from you. And then because of the time exposure, even some of the small lights in the distance are able to give you a little bit of reflection and to show up a little bit. Here's another example, just like this one and this second one up here, where somebody has set up the camera on a tripod. They take a light and they just kind of move around and they try different things and just kind of have fun with it. You can do this on your own. It takes a little bit more practice because you've got to open up that shutter speed. Then you've got to get in front of the camera, and then you've got to do all the activities. Or you could use 1, 2, 3, several people and have a group of people working on this all at the same time. But it really is a fun way to experiment with photography, and every once in a while you're going to get a picture that's just really, really neat. Now, I know that I've taken a great time on this because I do enjoy photography. In our world today with the cameras that can take pictures and the digital photography, and almost everybody's got cameras like that, and they take a lot of pictures. I see a lot of kids on Facebook and other media sites and on the internet that are already got the experience of playing around with these and doing some different things. And 20 years ago, most people did not know how to do this, and kids today have really a lot of capability with the cameras to do this. So I really took a long time. I hope you, if you got a little bit bored, took a break, stopped the video for a while, and took a little walk or got away from it a little bit, because I know it's long. But some of the things that were in this are going to be on your photography quiz. So you want to make sure you go through all the different areas of photography that I have here. It is an area that I spend a lot of extra time in. I wanted to give you the basics. Hopefully we'll create a class in the future that can get into really some of the advanced photography stuff. And hopefully you'll have a little fun with this. But when you're taking pictures and you're looking at different things around you, try to do 3 different things. Try to look at the object or the subject or the point of interest from a distance. Try to look at it as if you were within a few feet of it, maybe a normal conversation length, and then try to look up at it close up. And some cameras will not allow you to get too close. The maximum closeness on average is about the length of your hand. So if you can reach out with your hand and touch that object, you're probably going to be able to get a close-up picture of it. If you want to get closer than that, then you're going to have to get into some more advanced things like a macro lens or a close-up lens and get a little bit more experience going in that area. Possibly build up to a little bit more expensive camera. What I always tell my children and my students is start off with whatever you've got. A $50 camera, a phone camera, whatever you've got, start off with that, and as you get better, move up a little bit. You know, don't go out and buy a $2,000 or $3,000 camera because you're probably not going to know how to use it as well. Start off, build up. Then if you've got the interest and the desire and the passion, go ahead and start saving your money up and trying to get a little bit better camera. Try to observe the things that are going on around you. As I mentioned before, we tend to run through life and walk through life and not look at what's going on. Stop. Just sit down and look. Look at the people. Look at the faces. Look at the expressions. Watch kids. You know, watch pets. Look at the things they're doing, and look at kids and pets together. That's even better. So look at the things going on in the world around you. Look at the changing of the leaves. Look at the weather. Look at the clouds in the sky. My own children always tease me because I'm always looking at the clouds or the sunset and saying, boy, that would be a great picture. Another thing I might tell you, and one of the failures that I've had, is I do a lot of things and I see a lot of things in life and I say, that would be a great picture, but I just didn't happen to bring my camera. And with the cell phones that we have today, that's not quite as much of a problem. But get in the habit of taking your camera with you. Especially these small cameras, you can stick it in your pocket. Nobody knows you have it. Stick it in your purse. Carry it around. And then when you find that one great picture, you're going to be ready. And you're going to be ready to take the picture. Again, try to use all of the composition techniques that we've talked about. Leading lines, repeating lines, law of thirds, breaking the law of thirds, framing, all the different things that we've talked about. Try to explore those and make better pictures. Try to imagine things and try to tell a story when you're looking at the subject or whatever it is you're taking a picture of. Get close and fill the frame. Try to really get close to your subject, like the little girl on the right. We don't need the rest of her body. The rest of her body is probably not that interesting. Get close to the face. Get to the expressions. And the most important thing is to try and play around. Photography is not so much in the equipment that you have, it's in what you see in your mind. And if you can learn these techniques that we've talked about, both in the composition video and this one, you can probably get to the point where you can take some pretty darn good pictures.